Welcome to the Trek Wars podcast, the one podcast that dares to answer the most important question in fandom, which is better, Star Trek or Star Wars, by going through both franchises in chronological release order. I am Kenny Madison, the Star Trek contingent, and with me, as per always, is...
Aspen Webster, Star Wars fan here. Nice Star Wars fan. Good Star Wars fan. Lovely Star Wars fan. Nice person. Nice person. I'm a nice person.
You are a nice person, someone that has a great deal of empathy for
nice.
others, including a general Gungan attitude. That forced segue means that we can only be covering 2 episodes. That's right, Star Trek the original series, The Empath versus Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 1, The Gungan General. And boy, oh boy, Aspen, I think this is the truest thing that I've ever said for any podcast episode. These are 2 pieces of episodes.
Oh no. Okay. I mean,
no, that's not a statement of quality. We got 2 episodes.
It is a statement of quality.
We have to make no mistake. The true thing that you and I can both agree on is that we are about to talk about 2 episodes in 2 long-running science fiction franchises.
Well, we could counter that. Maybe actually Star Wars is more of a space opera fantasy.
Star Trek is a space opera science fiction.
Yeah, I guess Star Wars is... Well, what I'm saying is, Kenny, is there really any ultimate truth? Is there really anything that we couldn't dissect until we get bored and or angry?
I disagree. There is an ultimate truth in the sense that our listeners are the greatest listeners on the planet.
That's true. I shall not dissect. You are indeed truly beautiful. I love you. I give you kisses.
And before we proceed on to our analyses of both of these episodes, we have some housekeeping to take care of.
Okay. If you would like to come over and wash my dishes.
No, that's not not the housekeeping that we're talking about, Aspen.
I would love that. Also,
instead, we're talking about our Patreon, patreon.com/trekwarspod, where we put up early versions of our episodes, extended versions of our episodes, like last week's episode, Wink of an Eye versus Dooku Captured, where on our Patreon, you can listen to a 45-minute extended version of that episode.
What did we even talk about?
Well, because we always have our pre-show chat, and then I also cut out an additional 5 or 10 minutes from the main episode as well, yeah. Just for flow.
Yeah, no, you're a beautiful editor. You're a beautiful man.
Just for flow.
Yeah.
Just for flow. Anyways.
Just for flow.
Arizona Mark talks about how we talked about our experiences by doing 48 hours of improv. In a row, we did 48 hours of improv.
That's what we did.
All awake. And you can listen to that, patreon.com/trekwarspod. From Arizona Mark, wish I could have experienced your 48-hour improv in person. I gave Sylvie a kiss like you asked. Sylvie is his dog. Aspen, I also tried to watch Walker for 1 season, but couldn't even make it through the full first season. Thank you so much, Arizona Mark.
A kind gentleman.
Extremely kind gentleman.
A sweet Star Wars fan. A nice Star Wars fan.
A sweet Star Wars fan. A nice Star Wars fan. Speaking of sweet and nice Star Wars fan, Austin Aaron writes into our email address, trekwarspod@gmail.com. Hi, Captain Kenny and Admiral Aspen.
It's alliteration. Consonation.
No, I'm gonna have to talk about that to my therapist. Anytime you even obliquely mention toxic fandom, I want to have a huge conversation about the cycle of enjoyment, disillusionment, refreshment in fandom, and why some entitled fans get stuck in disillusionment. But today, I was just wondering which phase you each currently are in that cycle regards these 2 franchises.
Wow.
And what was the series movie that moved you into your current phase?
Wow.
Personally, The Clone Wars was a refreshing influence for my Star Wars fandom. The Ahsoka series, too. Disagree.
Let him have his personal likes, Kenny.
Our fans are perfect. And also, Austin Aaron is wrong.
God damn it.
A non-irradiated Seaman, Austin Aaron. P.S. So proud of you both for your 48 marathon run. I really wish I could have been there in person. Kiss, kiss, kiss. So the question is, where are we concurrently in our fandoms for these franchises?
I will tell you. Okay. It is funny. Because I think I had planned to talk about the Acolyte getting canceled.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect segue for us talking about the Acolyte, because my I'm extremely disillusioned with the state of where Star Wars is going, and I have nothing to
Yes.
look forward to except for Andor season 2 because I know what to expect from Star Wars at this point.
It's funny. I am not in disillusionment space with Star Wars. Um
You could just say that, but a little bit more dead. That would be great.
Star Wars. I think it helps. I think it helps that what I have to look forward to 6 more seasons of Clone Wars
Mhm.
and all of these pieces to frankly rewatch and love. Like I was as we are right before I watched the episode for this week, I was looking through the rest of the episodes of the season and I just kept going, "Oh my god, that's right. That's a banger. This is a banger. This is a banger." And I'm pretty sure that across the board people typically maybe like rank season 1 as like the lowest, like just in terms of the Clone Wars seasons.
Mhm.
And that's probably true, but in the same way that you're like, well, I'm reading all these great books and like that one just happens to be my least favorite because I was like, it's full of extraordinarily good episodes.
Well,
Like
which
the
I gotta say, I gotta talk about. I'm reading this terrible Star Trek book, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Indistinguishable from Magic,
uh,
and the Star Trek lit verse post Nemesis is exquisite.
yeah.
It is so good, except for this one trash novel, which is just like everything that is the worst instincts from, quite frankly, Star Wars stuff, where it's just like this thing that you recognize, blam. This thing you recognize, blam. Are you wondering how these things got there? Don't worry about it. We don't need to do the emotional legwork because you just like these things.
Mhm.
It's really frustrating. It's so dead on the page.
Yeah. I
Anyways,
yeah, I mean I do have a slight fear that that is the way Star Trek will start to go. You don't
disagree, my
you don't
guy.
think so?
No,
I think the canceling of Lower Decks was a problem, Prodigy is a problem. Those are like um
I would understand, except I think 5 years for Lower Decks is probably a good run. I could
sure.
feel in season 4 is just like I feel like it's starting to get a little bit thin.
Mhm.
Even though, make no mistake, I still adore it. And if I'm looking for some Star Trek in a pinch, I'll go to it because it's exquisite. And also, the 2 shows that we have on deck, I'm very excited for the state of Star Trek. Is the Starfleet Academy show,
Sure.
which
That's
is not
fair.
just, hopefully, if it's done right, is
Right.
not just another we're just gallivanting on a ship again because we've
Mhm.
done that so many times.
Mhm.
No, this is seems to be a different perspective. We have
Yeah.
the
I'm just telling you I'm afraid
sure,
cuz I think it almost has we can get into it. I
yeah,
Star
please.
Wars, not to interrupt your what's the other thing that's coming out
Well,
for
I
Star Trek?
interrupted you too.
What's the other
Uh,
thing that's
the
coming out?
Starfleet Academy thing, the Section 31 movie, which I think could go. I'm very wary of it because whenever folks are playing in the Section 31 bailiwick, that is not the writers of Deep Space Nine or to a degree Enterprise. They're like,
Mm.
okay, cool. We think this Star Trek stuff is corny and hack. But Section 31's badass because that's a moral gray. And we know how to write that.
Is Section
And they just make
31
it actiony and stuff.
that's like sort of like CIA-esque thing that happened in DS9?
It's
What's
Black Ops
Black
stuff. Like
Ops, right.
so secret that the president of the Federation doesn't even
That's
know
right.
about
I
it.
remember that now.
And
Yeah.
those
It's
those folks were talking about things like that was brought about because they wanted to talk about what it takes to, even though you have this completely benevolent idyllic empire,
Mhm.
they're talking about it with the Federation and Starfleet being analogous to America and trying to
Yes.
interrogate the notion of no matter how good your ideals are,
Once
how
again,
how are you perpetuating it?
God, I fucking love DS9.
Versus like in Star
God.
Trek Discovery, where they're like, Section 31 is
Are
the
there
secret
yeah.
baddies.
The secret bad days.
And that's not good enough or
It's
strong
boring.
enough. But
It's
the
boring.
trailer for it did kind of make it look like Star Trek Guardians of the Galaxy, which to be fair is Star Trek Prodigy. Um, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. And then
Prodigy.
also the weird Tawny Newsome, Justin Simeon show.
That's right. That's the one that actually excites the shit out of me. We've talked about
Because
that.
I'm like,
Yeah.
this sounds
Yeah.
so out of left field.
Yeah, I
And
love
I'm
that.
like,
Right.
cool, great,
Um,
yes. because I don't need another TV show like old fuddy-duddy Star Trek fans are like, Star Trek Legacy, do that show, which is just like more of the same characters. But that's not good for your general audiences who they want to experience their thing for the first time.
Oh, I mean, that's an interesting notion.
I don't think that they know that that's what they want.
Of course.
You just have to look at Deadpool and Wolverine, which made so much money, but also that movie's not that movie only succeeds because of its cameos and its references to lore, not fundamentally as a good story.
So the Star Wars piece,
I like this discussion. This is a great discussion.
Here is, there's two kind of. This is so reductive. I feel like
here we go.
The part of my fear with Star Trek, right, has to do with this first element, which is what Disney and Lucasfilm is deciding is worth their money to put out there.
Mm-hmm.
And my fear, bringing that up of like, well, I'd have this fear around Star Trek, which is that like when you do start to get into what feels like a redundant sort of treading cycle of like, well, we know that Deadpool versus Wolverine will make money because of these cameos and the sort of like tongue-in-cheek ask, like, I see that, I recognize that, as opposed to like, I'm leaning into the emotionality of a new type of story, whatever that looks like. That is, I think that there is an element there of the like, we'll just keep doing what works and what works. When it comes to the Acolyte, I do not know. I know that every episode, it costs a lot of money to make.
Sorry,
so
we're talking about the Acolyte getting canceled.
Let me start from this from a very neutral perspective, and then let me actually like really lose my mind.
Neutral perspective. Star Wars is a franchise.
Star Wars is a fucking franchise. I don't know what their toy selling looks like. I don't know if they didn't even make any Acolyte toys because they actually
Aspen neutral.
Sorry. I don't. It costs a lot of money to make each episode, and I do know. I know that viewership, like, I'm actually not sure about their viewership versus other shows. I have a suspicion that it actually isn't not very low comparatively. But one of the things I'd say is like, okay, well then why don't we have a new vision for types of budgets that you put out for these shows? Like there are different types of stories you can make that don't cost $20 million an episode.
Almost like there should be transparency with exactly how the money that their shareholders and stockholders are giving them,
right?
As opposed to what I'm sure they're not doing, which is spending it, on themselves. Because Disney is notoriously a great company to work for.
You're bringing up another actually really interesting conversations. I don't know this industry, but if it's anything like any other type of corporate industry of being subject to your shareholder expectation as opposed to like the quality of content or material or widgets being put out there, the expectation, the perception of a thing. Stocks are complicated. No, fuck that. They're not. Whatever. It's mostly about perception.
It's all snake oil.
Yes, it is almost entirely snake oil salesmanship. So like, I don't know. I don't think it is as simple as, like money in, money out. I think there are like perception elements within this. Also, this is where I'm going to stop at neutrality. Go on. Thank you. Please go on.
No, I was about to be like, screw neutral, because this is emotional, and like it's freaking yet again, whenever there's an economic downturn, rather a perceived economic downturn, because it just apparently everyone just decided that the economy was going to downturn a little bit, and who gets punished? Not all of the folks that look like me, right? To be sure.
And so that everybody knows, because this is typically an audio medium.
Although you can subscribe to it, youtube.com/@TrekWarsPod.
But you're just
the YouTube version.
A sweet little bearded white boy. Hello. Yeah. And it is people of color and gender expansive people and women, and mostly women and women of color and queer people. Fucking always. So this is where we'll get really mad. This is The Acolyte, not a perfect show.
No.
It's not a perfect show. Hilariously, I ended up becoming deeply invested in it because it was a show that felt so different and fresh and interesting, and things were happening that I was like, I don't ever really get to see this type of wildness in a Star Wars thing so far. The last time I felt this kind of like weird, frankly, sexual tension and pieces like that was Han and Leia, and I have yet to feel it since. Like those types of elements are interesting because they are human and dynamic. It is a show that head writer is a queer woman. It was headed by a non-binary Black actor, and it has a cast of, it's like a coven of people of color, of witches, and it's queerness everywhere. Manny Jacinto, all of these different elements. An actor who is South Korean, just like absolutely tremendous, right? It's a different type of story and a different type of context. There's plenty you could talk about, but
So few member berries as well.
So few member berries. And also, so again, I don't want my emotionality to get in the way of what I'm trying to say here, because I think there's so many different elements, though, of like why I'm so mad about this. One is the blatant racism of the thing. And this is not just an Acolyte piece. Amanda Stenberg started getting horrific comments and racist comments before the show even came out. Like, absolutely just like terrorized. Moses Ingram from that's that her last name, from Obi-Wan from the Kenobi show. Moses Ingram might be someone else, but the woman who played the baddie in Kenobi.
No, I only watched the first 3 episodes.
So she was tremendous in that show. Just really quick, I want to make sure. Yeah, it is Moses Ingram, the Inquisitor Reva. Absolutely, just like barrage of racist and sexist comments because she's a Black woman. Of course, you go all the way back to John Boyega before The Force Awakens even came out. This like anger that he could even like, because I think he was like holding a lightsaber, right? Just like,
yeah,
we're talking about just like pure, unfiltered racism, sexism, queerphobia, transphobia, any kind of thing. That is what we are talking about here. Just to like lay the groundwork. And then, I that's a core of it. And then there's the other elements of what it takes, like the space that stories get to explore and expand and be the kind of story that they can be. This is a common thing, a thread that we're hearing. I think people are really starting to talk about a lot now, which is like, I'm thinking about the Clone Wars thing. It's like, well, this first season, even though I'm like, I actually think it rocks. At the time, it was like, you know what?
No one liked it. Oh my gosh. It was a complete affront to everything Star Wars. And then, like anything, you give it time, suddenly people are nostalgic for it. And then you can see the value of it detached of what your expectations are.
Yes. And also just its quality itself. It had the ability to breathe. A character like Ahsoka gets to grow as a literal character. Like that, we get to start a certain way. The whole thrust of Western storytelling is that your characters change. So that means they have to start here,
Yeah.
and then they get to grow and become something. If they were static the whole time, what would they be? So they can't just get to start at like, fuck yeah, like you need to give them time. You need to give your story time, your ideas time. And perhaps the cost structure of the thing is actually a problem here. And it started when we started doing like Netflix, like take it all in at once and have 8 episode shows, and it's a mini series. That's all we get these days. Like maybe that's part of it. But I think too, like when you have this type of structure, so there is both the structural problems of the thing that they can come out and they can be like, well, it doesn't make sense for us like to throw this kind of money at a thing that's like actually not that great, right? And it's like, well, why? And this goes to the Rolling Stone article is written about it, which is talking about how Star Wars fans, the worst of Star Wars fans, need to fucking get over themselves and die already. It doesn't say that, but that was what I took from it. Go fuck yourselves and throw yourselves off a cliff.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying. You absolute knobs. But like, why would any creator who isn't a fucking Zack Snyder white boy want to even like commit any time to, like, why, and like they're just going to be tokenized and then thrown out.
Yeah.
Like that's what's going to happen. And then you're like, it's more than just like, okay, well, yeah, your show didn't go to second season. It's like, well, then you also, your actors weathered terrorism, like against them. Your writing is like, you yourself are like, you have to, like, I can't even imagine like the emotional strain of the thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and then, yeah, and now you're fucked. And now you have to like go, no, go find another job too. And like, why would any creator who isn't just a white guy want to even go near Star Wars? And then because of that, you're going to get boring ass stories. The end.
You are going to keep getting guys in helmets,
Star Wars
and
is helmets.
folks with deep fake faces of things that you love.
God damn it. Yeah.
Because of this loud faction of fans who need it to be exactly the same as whenever it grew up, as opposed to, and I think the problem with Star Wars as opposed to where Star Trek is now, they're not telling stories for stories' sakes.
No.
Star Trek Lower Decks, I think people really like now. But whenever it came out, every Star Trek fan was like, including myself, was like, no, that's not Star Trek.
Wild. Really?
But then, yeah. No, it's not Star Trek.
What's
But then
Star Trek? Yeah.
luckily, I think this is also indicative of the medium of how Star Wars existed, or at least existed within the cultural mind for so long. There are these movies. There are these 3 movies, and that's it for at least for these all suburban white kids that are growing up and watching the original trilogy over and over and over and over and over again. So that gets locked into the mindset, and it can't be anything else. Star Trek has the benefit of being episodic by its nature. Even the original series, every single episode could have a completely different tone. And while Next Generation definitely had its detractors whenever it came out, because they were like, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy? No, it's not Star Trek. Picard? He's bald. Why? Luckily, the internet did not exist in the way that it does now. And by the virtue of how the thing is delivered, Star Trek gets the benefit of being whatever it wants to be. So whenever they announced this new Justin Simeon, Tawny Newsome show, which is a multicam sitcom, or not, maybe not a multicam sitcom, but they've said is a sitcom that exists canonically within the world of Star Trek. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. If it fails, at least I know that they are trying.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that Paramount would just be like, let's put this in development. Because that is weird as hell to do with like one of your biggest franchises. And Disney is like, what if we did The Mandalorian on the big screen?
Well, I mean, yeah. Sorry, I don't mean Disney's doing that because Disney would never, but they are being like, yeah, let's do this different story with like creators of color and stuff. And then they're just like, fuck you.
Yeah, because I mean, like we are paying attention to within the season 3 meta narrative of Star Trek, behind the scenes, they want the optics of being progressive without actually being threatening anyone in the South, as they explicitly state within These Are the Voyages, season 3 by Mark Cushman and Susan Osborne.
I mean, I guess that's interesting. Yeah, Star Wars can slightly get the optics of being like, oh, sure, well, we like gave you something.
And in 10 years, people will be nostalgic for Acolyte. And in 10 years, people will be nostalgic for Book of Boba Fett and all of these other items of Star Wars. And then we won't realize how good we had it, because it would have gotten flattened out even more.
I have to.
How you doing, Aspen?
I feel so upset. Like, I genuinely feel so upset. There is a conversation here around like, should something keep going? Maybe it should stop. You know, like I said, I do have stuff to look forward to in Star Wars. I have all of the Clone Wars. I have Rebels. I have films.
Andor season 2, a radical as hell show that somehow managed to exist. But
I
it
mean,
also probably helps that the creator is a white dude and the star of it is a white passing guy.
I mean, yes, I do want to call out that like Diego Luna is a his strong Mexican accent, and that is a big deal. And like
Mm-hmm.
it's noticeable. Like I know people who are like talking about how their parents watched like that is the thing about Rogue One, right? That like I will always give it, which is like people walked in and were like, that's my accent, you know? But, yeah, it's made by like what, a British white guy. It gets to fly under the radar too. It's an extraordinary show. You know what's so funny though about Andor? I don't think it was you who said this because I don't think you would have said this. People are like, or maybe you did. I don't know. Someone was just like, well, it just like doesn't like look like Star Wars. And I'm like, but it
I
does
would
though.
never have said that.
It does though. Like that's what's so funny to me is I'm like, I love Star Wars. That show looks like Star Wars. Like
That person's expectations of Star Wars, like so much of fandom, is so narrow.
it's wild to me. Like I'm like, I don't but that's the question I want to ask people. I want to be like, what do you think it is then? Like, do you think it's like a sort of cartoonish aspect or like a kind of a bigger, broader, like bigger than life kind of thing? I don't think of it that way. That show captures the feeling of Star Wars to me perfectly. Like it just does.
Yeah.
I remember speaking at the marathon years ago at
The
like
48-hour improv
40
marathon
hour improv marathon
that we both did.
years ago at like 4 a.m. I did a Star Wars show. It was like the most grounded, like it was just like a straight Star Wars narrative for 45 minutes. And it was like, it worked, right? Like there were lightsabers and stuff, but it's a kind of story you would have seen in Andor or The Acolyte or something. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
no noticeable like main characters, just like the vibe of Star Wars. And like I remember thinking, like, obviously everybody was a group of extraordinary people, right? And
Yeah.
like it just works so well. And I was just like, because we know what Star Wars feels like. We know its settings, we know its sensibilities. Like, I don't understand what you mean doesn't look like Star Wars. And I don't think people do either. And do know what some people think Star Wars doesn't look like to them, and it doesn't look like Black people.
For
You know
some
what I mean?
people,
Like,
Star Wars is solely that one scene in Rogue One where Darth Vader lights up his lightsaber, or that one scene of The Mandalorian where Luke Skywalker fires up his lightsaber.
I just, I'm not going to be able to fight Lucasfilm. I'm not going to be able to, or fight Disney. You know what I mean on this? Like, there's nothing to be said. Like, there is to them, like, this is capitalism. This is the neoliberal to fascism structure that is the wild, like, the wild one-to-one of what Star Wars is showing and then what's happening in the real world, which is like, this is why I don't actually think it has to do with cost. I think it really does have to do with cowling to like what you like from a capitalistic perspective. I'll tell you who wins, and it's not marginalized people. You know? So it's short-term gains. It's not long-term investment in things.
What would have happened if they had allowed the Acolyte to cook, and then the filmmakers were allowed to respond to good faith criticisms?
Yeah.
Within the text,
Right.
and then be able to build on their strengths, and perhaps those issues would have gone away, but there's no time.
Well, what that actually makes me think of too is like it's occurring to me that I was so intense about the Acolyte and defending it. It's almost like I was like, sorry, I don't have space to actually give good faith criticism because the bad faith criticism is so much louder than that.
It becomes a dog whistle whenever you're
Right.
just like, the Acolyte has issues.
Right. Well, and I'm like, yeah, because I'm like, oh boy, like even if you do have good criticism, it truly is good criticism. Like those voices are so loud.
Yeah.
Like, and it is bad faith. Like, and so it's like, imagine, a space where you could be like, here's my very good criticism for this. Like, here's some ways that like we could like, maybe it did chase a mystery at the expense of like true emotionality. Like those kinds of things are very real. So you get the space to create an even better story later, like exactly like you're saying. But like I, as a good faith critic, couldn't even feel like I could engage in that because I was just like, no, my actual good faith criticism is going to be drowned out by everything else. Like
Meanwhile, as well intentioned as Dave Filoni is, Filoni got time to cook so he could find Clone Wars.
he really did get time to cook. And that's the other thing when we talk about like when we talk about things like affirmative action or being mindful of like who we're putting into positions of power, like the difference is often that white guys just got time to cook. Like
Mhm.
they get the time to make mistakes and fuck up and get better and better and better. And like women, people of color, marginalized people don't. It's like you have to come in and be fucking perfect immediately. And also you didn't get all that time to like cook and get better at your thing. You immediately had to be good no matter what. And like, oh, you didn't do it perfectly. And you know, it's actually maddening. Like it makes me feel insane. Like absolutely insane.
Yeah.
I feel so upset. And I don't know. I also want to just throw out some conspiracy theories here. I think they're trying to make everybody look bad. They started doing that thing where Lee Jung-jae, Master Soul, they were like, "Oh, well our first choice was Keanu Reeves before him." Like they started being like, "Look, like it's almost like they're trying to like undermine everybody." Like that was just released that they're like, "Well, he wasn't even like our first choice." And I'm just like, "Fuck you. What are you trying to do right now?" Like this absolutely phenomenal powerhouse of an actor. Um, Christ, because I think he expressed frustration or sadness around it, and then they came out with that.
Yeah.
Like,
Because
absolute nightmares.
every single person works so hard on these things,
Right. Right. Absolutely.
at least below the line, and also actors showing up. And that can be extremely difficult. Writers, directors, producers. Um, and there's like a handful of people who have the most power. Don't necessarily do the lion's share or have the lion's share of anxiety. And even then, I don't know, just speaking of my experience as being a former under the line person, man, this stuff is harder than we will ever imagine.
Right. Right.
So you're feeling pretty nihilistic about Star Wars franchise.
No, I'm not actually. Like that's the thing. I don't well, franchise, yeah. I mean,
The forward direction, because I'm interested in Skeleton Crew because I watched the trailer of that and I'm like, this feels really different.
yep,
My initial instinct is to be like, that's not Star Wars. And because of that, I'm like, interesting.
good. I mean,
Yes,
because
let's
it
push it.
probably is. What the fuck is Star Wars? What the fuck isn't
It should
Star
be able to
Wars?
be anything. Also, copyright law is bullshit.
Yeah. Um, I have so much Star Wars. Like I have it. It's mine.
Mhm.
I have so much of what I absolutely adore beyond reason. Like some things I don't like as much, some things I do. Same for Star Trek. Um, I wonder if I mean Star Trek is as you pointed out is kind of showing a different path here, but like yeah, I mean the like Jesse Earl talks about, like in that like declining the meta myth of Star Wars kind of thing, like it is by nature this path like it's like we it it itself represents this sort of like that neoliberalism and then like a descent into fascism. Like it like the kind of that process itself
Mhm.
and of like the making of the thing. So my reaction is to be like, I wish you'd just stop.
Yeah.
Just like don't. Let it just like what you are doing to it is like it feels deeply exploitative at this point, right?
Yeah.
You're exploiting marginalized creators at this point, and I'm fucking done with you. Like that's the vibe that I'm having. Um so but Star Wars means everything to me.
Star
Like
Trek means everything to me.
I'm not disillusioned with Star Wars,
Yeah.
you know?
You're
So,
disillusioned with the process of creation in 2024 and the
yes.
fact that you have to fit within the bumpers or else.
Yes. Um yeah. I'm not a fan of actors and creators getting horrifying messages wishing them their death. Like, let me just tell you.
That's
Yeah.
bad.
Oh, that's what Amanda Listenberg and Moses got. Like, telling them they should die. Like, so yeah, I think we're talking about a lot of things sort of overlapping on each other. Yeah, the state of creation in 2024, the sort of like the culture, online culture, a lot of like what you're hearing about when people start to talk about like the radicalization, especially of like young white men in spaces, and as people that do not look like you gain power, you are fed the narrative that there are not enough resources and these things are being taken from you. And this is one of the responses. It's always been the response, and now we just have louder spaces for it. Um, yeah, I think it overlaps strongly into everything you see in politics. Every time someone's like, we're such a divided nation, I'm like, shut the fuck up. We're talking about more than being a divided nation. Like, we're talking about a lot of things that are going on that are mostly to do with racism and sexism and misogyny. So, and what we have constructed, what powerful people have constructed in terms of a narrative around haves and have nots, classism too, obviously, but like those are all overlapping with one another, interconnected. So anyway, oh, so fucking bored of it all.
I freaking love you. Do you need to take a break?
No, I'm okay. I'm just gonna drink my fizzy water.
Okay, well, while you drink your fizzy water, why don't I go ahead and start the work of talking about this week's episodes, the Empath versus the Gungan General. I'll do my synopsis here.
Yeah, dude.
Starting with the Empath, first aired December 6th, 1968. Writer Joyce Muscat, director John Erman. From the TV highlights printed in the December 6th, 1968 edition of the St. Petersburg Times, serving St. Petersburg and Tampa Bay, Florida. Aspen?
2 hours away from where I grew up.
This critic wrote, Star Trek is a bit rough to watch tonight unless you have a sadistic streak.
Yeah, true.
It's about a girl who has the unusual ability to absorb the pain of others, a kind of physical ESP. She is being used experimentally by two aliens, and her captors must have laboratory animals to torture so that they can discover her secrets. The animals, in this case, turn out to be Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And I will say, according to the Nielsen ratings, this was the second highest rated third season episode, following Spock's Brain, the season premiere, and placed first for the night in its just ratings, period, of its time slot.
Did you know this is one of the episodes, along with Plato's Stepchildren, that they just like wouldn't show on the BBC because it was so violent?
I did after reading this because, going into this episode, much like Wink of an Eye, I was like, this is going to be another one of those sleepy episodes.
Oof. It's unlike Plato. We'll talk about it obviously, but I found Plato's Stepchildren, as I noted, to be unnecessarily violent, or like not unnecessarily violent. Obviously, it just felt awful to watch.
Sure.
For actually that long. This time around, I was like, this at least feels like there is an intention toward it. It feels very cruel, but not cruel for the sake of cruelty, like cruel in terms of how actors are, like how these characters are acting. So it felt slightly different for me.
Sure.
Though still hard to watch.
You know what wasn't hard to watch? Actually, it was for me. The Gungan General.
Really? It was hard for you to watch? Oh my God. I was like, I'm having a great time.
I'm so glad that someone enjoyed the Gungan General. We'll get into it.
So, man, you just don't like Jar Jar.
Probably.
You just don't like Jar Jar, man. Who this time is voiced by Phil.
I will say that Bomb Bad Jedi was a better episode than this one.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of shenanigans in this episode.
And Bomb Bad Jedi had tonal whiplash, but
again,
we'll get into it.
It worked for me. Oh, well, it's fine. You don't like him. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. We'll talk about this later.
It's fine.
Oopsie. When I was growing up, but like I can't even remember what the show was that we were watching, but in the show,
where
it was when I was growing up, like it was like some sitcom or something. And
well, where was this?
Florida. 2 hours away from St.
Ooh,
Petersburg.
the nice beaches of Florida. Must be nice that you get to wear Mickey Mouse ears every single place.
That is actually legally required.
You rich fascist.
Yeah. Me from small town Central Florida. I am. So the
Well, from
Gungan
this-
General.
From this guy that grew up in Northeast Oklahoma, all of Florida is Miami to me.
Oh man. Did you know I didn't go to Miami at all until I was like 19 or 20 years old? And it's because it was because I needed it's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
I was flying to Santiago, Chile, because that's where I studied abroad. And I went back to Florida first to see my mom. And it was so much more expensive. Like, it was so much less expensive to fly from Miami. And I was like, I've never been to Miami. And she was like, let's go to Miami. And it took us 5 hours to drive there because that's how far away Miami was from where I grew up. She was from South Florida. So she was like, let's eat some guava pastries and let's have some Cuban sandwiches. And I was like, I can't, I'm a vegetarian. She was like, bah. So anyway, what was I saying?
Gungan General premise.
January 9th, 2009 is when it was released. It was directed by Justin Ridge and written by Julie Siege, with, of course, Henry Gilroy as series writer and Scott Murphy as supervising writer. And Lucas always there to give his thoughts randomly.
What
if we tied them together?
What they could be tied together?
What if they were just tied together?
They could be tied together?
Written by the TV archaeologist. Obi-Wan and Anakin are now hostages along with Dooku at Hondo and Hukka's stronghold on Florum. We expected this, right? Although I was like, didn't you switch out? It's fine. They're now hostages. Delegate Jar Jar Binks and Senator Karras arrive with the ransom and a battalion of troopers, only to find there is treason within the pirate ranks.
It's treason then.
It's treason then. Yeah, it's treason. There's another pirate who's just like, we're gonna get these spies. We're gonna make it seem like it was them. And
a pirate that sounds eerily like Jason Statham.
Yeah. There's this how did this get made bit. Sorry, I keep getting distracted. I was very upset for 30 minutes and now I'm like a little loopy.
Sure.
There's this how did this get made bit with, I can't remember who was the guest, but it was like the movie they were watching, Jason Statham is in it, trying to sound like he's like American, but he still keeps sounding British. And so the whole bit is that it's Jason Statham, Angelino, and it'll just be like, that's right, it's me, Jason Statham, Angelino, taking the 405 up to the 101 to get on the tears, like, oh, I'm flipping houses over in Atwood Village. And so good. Glasshill Park. Anyway, is this Jason Statham pirate? So anyway, it was an episode. You know what?
It was an episode.
It was a shenanigans episode.
It was a shenanigans episode.
Where Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Dooku are tied together by some kind of rope.
Yes.
And they keep trying to escape and then getting caught.
Which is
so funny.
On paper, first impressions. Got to play the first impressions theme song. First impressions. The Gungan General, on paper, sticking Dooku, Anakin, and Obi-Wan together with a big honking laser chain. Great premise for an episode.
Fantastic.
Great premise. Going to be nothing but character interaction. Juicy, delicious. Maybe even reach some sort of tenuous understanding with each other. Even though episode 3 dictates that these characters must remain in a form of stasis.
Right.
You like this episode a bunch.
I
think this is your favorite episode of all of Star Wars?
You got me.
It's The Last Jedi.
It is.
The Gungan General.
Yep. 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10.
The Book of Boba Fett. Then Empire.
Yeah. I had fun in the episode. And that's the truth of it. They could have dove farther into exactly what you're talking about, which is like, actually, like, if you have these 3 people together, what does it really mean? And mostly they're just sniping at each other.
Yeah.
And there's one distinct moment that I wish we could have spent even longer on, which is like they like pole vault onto this side of the wall, and like Anakin's holding on, he's like supporting both of them, and then the pirates shoot and Dooku starts to plummet, and Obi-Wan saves his life, and Anakin is like, hey, just drop him, but that's it, and that's the end of it. And I think that that's more, that should have had more than that moment. These types of things are actually far more fucking interesting than I think the episode gave it time for.
Oh yeah, and that's my big criticism for this episode.
Sure. If there hadn't been a lot of other stuff happening, and I don't dislike Jar Jar.
Again, Jar Jar antics, that's fine. But in the 2 Jar Jar episodes that we've gotten so far, Jar Jar has been employed much better than he was in episode 1.
100%.
Because Filoni and crew are more capable filmmakers than George Lucas was.
Yeah.
And 2, the 2 episodes that we've gotten have been tonal messes that have been detracting from something else.
That's funny. I just find it, well, for in this case, my opinion is that what was going on with the Obi-Wan Anakin Dooku was very similar in tone to what was happening with Jar Jar. And my actual desire, yes. And because I think they were fucking shenanigans. They were shenaniganing all over the place. They were like, gup, bup, 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 and then they'd get out and then they'd get caught and they'd be like, now we're back in the cell.
Sure, it was tonally similar in the sense that both of them were forced into tonal similarities, but like that's not.
But in my
if
thing,
if one of those plot lines had been taken out, then the other one would have had space for the characters to grow.
Well, sure.
Would have been able to luxuriate in the feelings, and maybe we could be like, Dooku, a noble warrior,
maybe,
even though he is fighting for the side of evil, and his intentions now have been twisted for evil.
Well, I think
there's a seed of what a just man might be.
Right.
Instead, no, we've got Jar Jar who's shooting stuff by accident. Aspen.
I don't want to split hairs here.
Do it.
I don't think that
split hairs.
I think my ask here is I wish they had actually committed more to a tone, like to actually dive. I'm with you. Like they should have done more.
Woo!
I'm not saying, but what I don't agree with is the idea that like, oh, they tried to match. They tried to match tone. No, you didn't. They don't. They're not matching tone. Like, I think swinging between the two would have been fine.
Sure.
Because I actually, again, as someone who really liked Bombad Jedi, I actually thought it worked to be like, because it actually, I think it doesn't go the other way. I think it affords more depth to the Jar Jar stuff. Interestingly, with the Jar Jar stuff, the fucking senator dies. He's clearly very upset. There's a lot of like seriousness given to it. The way that he's like jumping around, fucking things up, actually feels like it's Jar Jar understanding his own like clumsiness and like making it work for him, as opposed to it being like true fuck ups. I think that like there could have been, I think you're right, and that they should have spent more time really digging into that trio. And they didn't. That was just a like, like, and not because of Jar Jar, but because of it on its own. It was that way. That's what I'm saying. And it should have been better.
So what you're saying is that I need to divorce my expectations as opposed to what the episode is on the page?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Also, I don't know why I'm defending Jar Jar.
Do it.
I just don't dislike him as a character.
Do it. Defend Jar Jar.
You got Phil Lamar in here, missing Ahmed. Miss Ahmed, do you please?
Yeah, I was finding the performance of being like, this is, he's not getting it there.
Not quite.
But also what Ahmed Best is doing is so extremely specific.
Yeah, it is extremely specific.
You can only do an approximation.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't even aware.
Yeah.
Until we got BJ Fields here.
BJ Fields, right.
BJ Fields.
Phil Lamar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those episodes where I had fun. And of course, on reflection, I'm like, it could have actually, what a like opportunity that felt a little wasted.
Yeah.
Like, to really, instead of us griping at each other and continually getting caught over and over again, why not be like, whoa, what does this mean for us? And really dig into that moment of like, can you imagine Anakin being enraged with Obi-Wan for saving Dooku's life? How
Yes.
interesting would that have been?
The war could have been done.
There was a really
That's not true.
I think serious, like if there had been a real tonal shift was at the very end when he's clearly so fucking mad when he gets out at the end after all the
Mhm.
power has been turned off because of Jar Jar, and he comes out to like get his ship and leave. Dooku does,
Sure.
and he just straight up like force chokes that guy, and like he takes the pirate, he force chokes him, brings him up, forces him to shoot the other pirate, which I don't think we see that a lot, right? Like it was actually like the music was pretty scary. Like he was like the rage, like, and so it was kind of wild to have a like shenanigans episode and then to have this starkly like horrifying moment at the end and then for that to be it, right?
Mhm.
um and I wouldn't have not liked to have a whole episode of feeling that way,
Yeah.
just like, what does this fucking mean for us,
Yeah.
so you know what, I'm with you.
Whoa. Did not expect that.
I had fun.
Oh dear.
I had fun. Oh
Sure.
yeah, what are you gonna do?
Now what
I've
am I going to do? My entire identity was based in the anger that I felt against Aspen for liking this episode. Now we've reached a common
was
agreement.
I still liked it. Don't get me wrong.
Well, I didn't like it.
Well, there you go. Now we're back to disagreeing.
Bah!
Brah! You didn't like the Star Trek episode either?
I thought the Star Trek episode was pretty darn sleepy.
It was weird, wasn't it?
It's weird. There are aspects of this episode, the empath, that I adore.
Right.
The fact that the entire
Nema.
episode, the whole thing,
Nema.
one, I get to share it with my friend Aspen.
Oh my
Best
God.
part of it. Oh my gosh, stop. Oh
Oh
my
my God,
gosh.
stop. Do you want to move
Two,
out to LA? Everybody should move out to LA and hang out with me.
I let me visit first.
Let me bring all my friends to live
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah. Number two. Number one, I get to share it with one of my best friends in the whole wide world, Aspen Webster. Look at that. Number two, the whole episode is one big black box theater.
It is. They put up black curtains. Oh, so theatrical.
Which,
so cool.
funnily enough, in doing my research and reading These Are the Voyages Season 3 by Mark Cushman and Susan Osborne, was something that was on the script.
It's what she wanted, the writer.
It's what she wanted before Joyce Muscat
Yes.
was just a person that was working in TV.
Yep. And also
And-
in theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Worked. Wait, what do you know about this episode?
I know that. I know that she was a Star Trek fan. She had just got, and she was working on TV and she was, I mean, that's it. She was working in theater and she made the script and it was like
Aspen.
inspired by an earlier story. I can't remember the name of the story, but like the idea in Egyptian mythology of like someone speaking for the like judgment of someone else kind of, anyway.
Muscat was further inspired after reading about an ancient custom of inviting a person to speak on the behalf of another who is being judged.
Yep.
An early version of a character witness, and that this person was known as an answerer. It is apparently an Egyptian concept.
Mm-hmm. She seemed rad.
And also based off of the H.G. Wells, or the science fiction novel, When Worlds Collide.
Right. I think I got really excited because I have found there is a pattern of women characters being treated with a lot more complexity, surprise in stories written by women.
Mhm.
So I was curious about it. And I was curious about the sensibility of it as well, because
Sure.
it was extremely theatrical.
Yes.
And the moment they woke that woman up, the way that she like moved and was like dramatic, I was immediately like, I'm doing Fosse. It's just like,
Because Aspen and I are friends in real life, Aspen, upon watching this episode, sent me the video of Kristen Wiig as Liza Minnelli from Saturday Night Live.
Fosse. She even looked like Liza Minnelli.
Yes.
Her little short hair wig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt it. Or perhaps this is my male guilt showing, but I was just like, this is. I found the execution pretty sleepy.
Sleep.
Kind of did the exact same beats several times,
That's true.
which is frustrating.
It is.
And then you're teaching this character who seems to inherently have empathy,
Yep.
even though that is that's the name of the episode. But this character, who's named Jem, not to be confused with Jim.
Jim.
No one. But also at this point in production, everyone was really sleepy because making a Star Trek is hard.
Hard to make a Star Trek.
And also the making of this episode was surprisingly difficult.
Right. It like went over a day or two.
A day and a half. Well, a day.
I also saw this. It was because Shatner and Nimoy were being little twerps, and they were like, "This is how you should direct this," and she's like, "Go away,
Sure,
get out of here."
sure. This was also after, at least with the context that was provided within the book. This was after "Is There a Truth, No Beauty?" The episode with oh boy, the my goodness, I am
Medusa?
such a big star. The Medusan, yes, and Dr. Miranda.
Yep. Another an episode I truly did like, and another one where I was like, "Oh wow, this character."
Dynamite episode, and also famously, as we talked about in there Is There in Truth No Beauty episode, Gene Roddenberry added the idic to sell more things through his things, and so at least according to the book, Bill Shatner, that's what I call him, and
because you're
Leonard
friends.
Nimoy, we are, yeah. It's so weird to be friends with a 95-year-old equestrian. Anyways, I believe that their hackles were raised, and DeForest Kelly too, at least according to the book. Their hackles were raised enough because they were like, what are you gonna do? We want this show to have a little bit of integrity.
Yeah. There's a lot about the episode I did like. I think I could tell. Sorry, sounds like you found the quote.
No.
You didn't?
Still scrolling.
Look on your face. There I could tell based on what I read that like the writer of the script, like the script went through a lot of different shifts and changes.
Oh,
I would have been so curious to see what its original form was, because my guess is the path for Jem was made more sense, like in terms of what was being done.
Yes.
That's my guess, because you're right. Like it is a very strange sense. Like it doesn't logically make much sense. Like you're just like, yeah, this character who has fundamental to her literal being is empathy for others, and they're like, we need to teach her and also prove and make sure for the sake of her entire people if they're worth saving, because we got to teach her that it's worth it for her to give up her own life for someone else. And I was like, what? Like you can see how it has like the beginnings of such a good idea, and my guess is the good idea was there to start with and got slapped out of the way.
Yes. The quote, Alan Bergman, who plays one of the two alien overseers, said, delicious, and described Star Trek to a T. Given the minimal sets and the ludicrous pajama-like costumes of the regulars, the episode was quite successful in text and production.
So funny.
Tell me where he's wrong, counselor. Tell me where he's wrong.
It's not pajamas. Oh, so that's the other thing. The set, the starkness of the set, I really did like that it was like a black box theater.
I adored it. Yes.
I actually thought that was extraordinary. It reminded me a lot of the like that Old West episode with like the OK Corral one, where it was like that one obviously was a much more interesting set, but was still very stark. It was very dreamlike. It was very strange. It felt like this episode felt like watching an extended dream ballet. Which of course helped that she didn't speak. She just she was clearly like clearly a theater, like a dancer theater actor, from what I could tell. I didn't look up the actor, but the way her movements to me were very studied. And it was that's why and truly very exaggerated and Fosse-esque. And I just thought it was very interesting. Like everything to do with her and her facial expressions, everything that was focused on her was interesting as shit. The the core of things got messed up. I didn't understand quite where we were going, but and I was definitely, despite it being sleepy, I was definitely like engaged the whole time
There's some very interesting things. And
because
I
I
think
was
that
pretty horrified too. Like it's like watching a horror film, and I
which
like horror.
again, dude over here is like, yeah, it's just a sleepy episode. Not even processing the extreme amount of violence just because I feel so
Oh,
blasé
I was
about
so
it. And that's unfortunate.
I was deeply uncomfortable. Like,
And then also, I mean, the central lesson that they have to teach this person, they need to be willing to die.
ugh,
But you already have someone that seems immediately emotionally open,
yeah.
feels torturous.
Yeah, it was pretty horrifying. I mean, yeah, it's torturous, it's horrifying.
The
Again,
the
it did.
ori- the original ending of this had Jem just saving McCoy,
Mhm.
and they changed not Joyce Muscat, but Fred Freiberger and Arthur Singer and supervising producer Robert Justman and Roddenberry had his hands in it a little bit. I want you to know Roddenberry was happy to know that another woman writer was working for Star Trek. Um, and also the production was excited because she was not a member of the Writers Guild. So
Right.
that means that Star Trek was saving money.
Classic.
And also the way that Jem was described in the initial version, uh, the men are startled. The creature on the couch stands. It has the body of a girl woman, clothed in a gossamer material that sparkles like diamonds, dead white skin, curled hair, and large expressive eyes that shine out against the whiteness. That feels a little bit more Tim Burton-esque, a little bit more chilling.
Yeah. Yeah, like, she's kinda, like, a little creepy.
Yeah.
She's clearly trying to, like, make her less, like, Vaseline lens pretty lady.
And because I think this is an episode that is doing a lot of telling you that this thing needs to happen as opposed to showing, because Jem, the character,
Cannot speak.
can't speak. I know just what she's thinking, and I
Yeah.
don't have no reason.
Well,
Aspen,
don't
don't tell
I
me because it
it
hurts.
hurts, I know.
But to start, even though it's simple, but it is an easy fix of just having this person seem more like an other,
Yeah, right? I mean,
or I don't know, just make it like a sadistic general that you need to teach empathy to, someone that is trained in war.
or you start her out as a cold other
Yeah.
that doesn't want to help.
Yeah.
Like you actually have a change for her. That is where it becomes confusing. I, in fact, did not realize. I spent the first, like, half the episode being like, "Why the fuck is she here?" Because
Yeah.
nothing is pointing toward her. You're just sort of like, "She must be part of this," and then finally they're like, "She must be part of this," and I'm like, "I
Oh yeah.
know."
The explanation of the why the episode is happening is within the last 10 minutes of the episode, which is a
Right.
problem whenever you're trying to stage
Tell a story.
functional storytelling.
Yeah.
Don't mystery box it.
Right.
Try and have your motivations laid up front, but also the
Yeah.
arguments that we are positing have us trying to sympathize with with the captors as opposed to the actual torturous experience the that Jem must be going through, and then Kirk argues against, because those folks have both planets have inherent value.
Um, yeah, yeah, if I were doing this,
If you were writing the empath,
yeah, yes, if there is a lesson for Jim to learn, like, basically what I think there's a certain level of it, like, rubbing me wrong because, um, as an empath, I
whoa,
no, it's it's like you said, and like what can we assume based on this? It's like she already starts out like this is what they are as people.
she
They can.
starts out in terms of empathy.
Oh my god, you're
That was
getting
an
your
accident.
that was that an accident? Was that an accident? Or are you just like happy to start talking?
Well, I am happy to start talking. Are you right, folks?
God Christ Almighty! Go on, get it out, get it out.
In terms of empathy, Jem starts out pretty much as an 8, and her only drawback is that she doesn't want to die for someone else.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
um, which is
Exactly.
it's they're basically holding people hostage and being like, they'll die if you don't die,
Yeah. I,
which is
that's
stupid.
pretty
That's a stupid. That's a
pretty
stupid
wild.
argument.
It's pretty dumb. You're right. It's
Yeah,
pretty dumb. Like it it's and I think this is where it starts to like let's as a person raised as like a girl in a world that expects that kind of level of like you have to be very aware of everybody's needs at all time and provide for them like making her already like a woman or girl she's like she is femme and presenting in this space like and
you're saying that she's a stone cold hottie.
yeah, she's a girl. She looks like my Liza Minnelli. Yeah. She like to even start there and to then have so much expected, that much more expected of you, like put it into like a current state translation of it basically to say, and I feel like we see this a lot with see with women, with girls, see it a lot with mothers, right? It's like you should literally be willing to kill yourself, like to die for someone else to like destroy your entire life. And it's not because you are a good person or morally good. It is because like that is your duty. Like, and so I think the whole like the whole structure of it feels like it is leading toward that. And it can't be dissociated from the fact that she is like a delicate woman, you
It's
know?
crunchy. That's a crunchy premise to begin with.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It,
And also there just as you're saying that there is a possibility of something very delicious within that kernel. It just you can't unlock the potential within what would happen if this woman's inherent self-sacrificing nature was pushed to the ultimate test for the survival of her species.
right.
Um, but it's from the perspective of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Or
Yeah.
the easy fix, just put it through her viewpoint
I was going to say, wouldn't that have
and
been
you
wild?
experience the terror.
Yeah, I mean, that is like, God forbid we have it from that person's perspective. Like, it's like the same thing of Roddenberry being like, "Well, good, we got another lady just for the sake of having a lady," as opposed to like, well, what is the actual experience that she's going through? How would
Yeah.
she feel about this, as opposed to just being a thing that's talked about for the purposes of these other stories?
Yeah. It's frustrating. It also might just be baked into it, but also there's just belittling things that I'm pretty darn sure came after subsequent revisions. For instance, they wanted to literally make her hotter. Justman,
Couldn't have been any
Bob
hotter.
Justman,
Too
supervising
hot.
producer, says, I feel Jim, as described in the story outline, will not be as physically attractive to the audience as she ought to be. I think she ought to be ethereally beautiful and saint-like in her qualities. She should be gentle and pure and good and sweet and virginal and keep a kosher house.
Yep. Yep. Saint-like and virginal.
Okay, then you have done that's stupid.
Yeah.
Bob Justman, dumb,
It's
even though
boring.
his little mustache that he has is really cute.
Oh, is it?
It it
Fuck.
really is.
Fuck his mustache.
Well, Aspen, whoa.
Fuck it.
And also that's just like bad storytelling
It's bad storytelling.
because you're starting
Bad
the character
storytelling.
off.
Already.
You're
The
already
goodest
empathizing
you
with the
could be.
character,
Yes.
but the journey you are hiding the journey of this character. You're going, what is going on?
Yep.
You feel bad for her whenever she is suffering.
Yep.
And then you find out what the function of that suffering is. And then Kirk defends her as opposed to Kirk being a slam dunk ally and being like, Jem, what do you want to do? And Jem is easy fix. Jem speaks, even though that could be ableist in itself because we don't get very many mute characters,
Well,
period.
if she's like an empath, why doesn't she like he touch him and he can like feel what she's feeling or thinking? Like, why not go the other way? Like,
There
it
you
doesn't
go.
have to be speaking.
Easy
I
fix without having to
genuinely
have her
thought that's
speak.
what it was going to be. Like, I was
But
like,
it
oh, I'm
wasn't.
sorry. Does this not happen this way? She
Because
only.
the journey should be you don't have to self-sacrifice.
Yes.
It can be what they are doing to you is not adequate.
Is
And instead,
cruel
Kirk does argue for that, but it's Kirk arguing as opposed to being like,
for
well,
her.
what do you want?
Why couldn't she
It's
have grabbed them and translated that to them of like the lesson she actually learned is like we should be inherently valuable.
yeah, but it
Like,
doesn't feel like the episode is about
no, it's not about her.
about that torture. It's about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy continually getting hurt,
Yes.
and
Which,
then Jem has to be like,
yeah. I
for
mean, it's not.
folks that aren't watching me on the YouTube channel, I'm walking up like the Empath bouncer. She touches them and then goes, "No, Aspen, you do it. You
Sorry.
do the Manelli." And then, they do the rad special effect.
Oh, it actually is really good. It's like
Yeah.
whatever like scars on them, she takes it onto her body and then it goes away. Um yeah, she has no agency and therefore has no, I mean she sort of does, but she doesn't actually personally. It's just for the story and the plot. It is, you're right, about our boys who are also once again doing what they always do. They aren't changing. Like they're like, well, of course we'd sacrifice ourselves for each other. Blah. And you're like, okay,
In a pretty good
yeah,
scene where they are trying to fight over who is going to go get sacrificed.
that is a great scene.
And
But
Spock,
what's
because
different about that?
Kirk is suffering from the bends, which
Which
is such a weird specific detail that I really, really liked.
I did like that too.
And I wish would come up other times if they are deep in the core of a planet.
Yep.
But then Spock injects McCoy injects Kirk with the thing so he can get over the bends. That means that Spock is in command, so Spock makes the call to go sacrifice himself, and then McCoy's like in a pig's eye and then shoots Spock, and then McCoy goes to make the sacrifice. And then we get the closest that we ever get to D. Kelly being shirtless.
Oh yeah. I was like, wow. What cut his shirt? What cut his shirt into
Well,
tatters?
those chains.
Those chains
Those
that were on
chains
his
that
arms.
he was hanging from.
Oh, gotcha. God. I here's a question I want to ask.
Oh gosh, I love answering questions.
What
Here we go.
is like what are they defining in this okay, this is a thematic sort of moment here. Like of what in terms of like what are we defining in terms of empathy or like in that episode?
I think the bottom line thing that our villains, the Vions, are going after is Jem can signify that her race is worthy of saving if she allows herself to die for these strangers.
Okay.
That is empathy.
That is empathy.
Through that notion,
Yeah.
that means that every person on that planet should be willing to sacrifice their own lives for someone else, no matter what.
No matter what, which makes them worthy of saving.
Yes, as opposed to the selfish ask that they are making, as opposed to just making a call because it's impossible. You should just save them because it is life.
Right. Right. I mean, I think the sort of weak thing that was brought up is like, well, there are multiple planets that we could save, and we have to decide which one is worth saving. And
Why don't you just make more trips?
Yeah.
Huh? But
Like,
also, that's not the function. The function of this is a moral quandary that is actually, I think, at the end, an unjust clarification, an unjust question that is being posed to Jem.
how do you identify empathy? Like, how do you describe it?
You sense other people's emotions. You
Okay.
feel with people. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I think of empathy, there's that sort of Brene Brown-esque like description of like the sympathy versus empathy. Whereas sympathy could be like I see that like, I'm sorry that you're experiencing this pain. Empathy is sort of like the ability to put yourself into someone else's place, which I think they are actually, interestingly enough, in the episode, the like strongest signifier of that is the like, I literally am taking on your physical malady.
Mhm.
Like, it's almost like the truest manifestation of empathy that I'm like, if you were to say to me, like, I'm having a bad day, like, sympathy is like, well, I'm sorry to hear that, versus like me being like, let me hear about your day. And like, when you say, like, well, I got into an argument with a friend, I am like, I know the pain of having an argument with a loved one and how that can feel that way. Even if I like have never had it, I could be like, well, I know the pain of feeling scared that I might lose something or whatever it looks like, right? Like I am like present in this with you as a form of like my own, like I can feel like this feeling that you feel. And that is that kind of distinction of empathy. Here's my question.
I appreciate that clarification.
And that's just me. It could
That's
be
good.
anybody, like, I'm sure other people have different definitions. Like, I think
I think empathy is pie.
yeah? Tell me more.
Apple pie, pumpkin pie, blueberry pie.
Wait, if that's what empathy is, what's sympathy?
Cake. Anyways,
My next leading question is like,
that's so stupid.
at the end of the Gungan General episode,
Here we go.
one, there is the move that there's the move that Obi-Wan makes to save Dooku. And then there's also the move at the end to not like take the pirate's end, to not like arrest Hondo, to be like, hey, like we have no more quarrel with you. We're letting you go.
Mhm.
And also just the general like idea of Jedi and like the like, well, we have compassion. It's like explicitly said textually of like, it is important for Jedi to have compassion. So I guess like then like what's the difference between that, you
Even though
know?
Obi-Wan didn't save the other prisoners
Oh my
right
god.
next to Anakin.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah, well, that seems very classic Jedi to me.
But also, this episode is
Pick and
rife
choose.
with things that strike me as the Jedi have to be this powerless
Yeah.
because the plot dictates it.
Right. It
Because
is really tough.
the
Yeah.
rules wildly vacillate of how powerful the Jedi are. That's I truly think that that is fine
Yeah.
because
What are you gonna do?
whatever.
Yeah.
But and also whenever the episode is not working at a emotional level for me,
Mhm.
then I start going into those logic plot holes
Of course. Yeah. I'm the same way. I'm like, well, if you're not actually proving it to me, then I'm preoccupied with the fact that like other things
Mhm.
don't work.
because I just think that the episode just was not there
But
dramatically.
so what you're saying like it's kind of a moot point because like it didn't kind of make sense, like the kind of compassion that he was presenting, because it felt like it was more for plot as opposed to anything that was
Oh,
like emotionally oriented.
yeah, because
Okay.
it definitely felt like it was moved because we need to have an ending of the episode as opposed to an extension.
But
Here's
why I mean, but like the saving of Dooku, why include that?
because it's great. I love
How?
that. And also it's a micro moment
Yeah.
as opposed to a big character beat because that's the structure of this episode.
I
I
guess
think it's just a lovely detail that indicates character.
well, that's what I'm getting at. I would argue that Obi-Wan
You would?
I would argue that
You
Obi-Wan
fascist.
is a fundamentally compassionate person. I think probably what Obi-Wan and other Jedi are missing is like an engagement with real empathy.
Aspen?
Yeah.
He's not a fundamentally compassionate person, or at least maybe he's a fundamentally compassionate person within the context of Clone Wars. But
Yeah.
with this one line, I
Okay.
undo your entire argument
Okay. What is
in regards to Obi-Wan.
okay. What is
Why do I get the sense we picked up another pathetic life form?
well, he was also I mean, I think there's also space for them for he as a character to grow as a person. I think
Mhm.
he becomes more compassionate over time. I think the older he gets, I think he goes a dumb old dumb dumb then.
Do you think that Filoni will ever make a cartoon show that bridges episode 1 and episode 2?
Maybe. Why?
To see more Obi-Wan and Anakin.
Maybe. I actually wouldn't hate that. I do love their relationship. I think it's
Little
really
boy
interesting.
Anakin, and
Little
then
boy
Obi-Wan
Anakin.
becoming
Yeah,
the compassionate person, as
trying to
opposed
become a more compassionate person.
as
Yeah.
opposed to the more hard-edged Obi-Wan. And I say that extremely lightly because the textual examples of how we get Obi-Wan in episode 1 are so threadbare.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't watch all of the Kenobi show.
It's
That's an
pronounced the Kenobi Shobi.
the Kenobi show me. That's an extremely empathetic, or not empathetic. I still actually that is an empathetic Kenobi, as opposed to like I think he is really like. But I think the reason he is able to tap into that is because of I don't think this is necessarily true. I don't think you need to have like experienced trauma to be an empathetic person by any means. You don't have to even have experienced like the pain of someone else to get to like be like be present. You can find like it's, but I do think by that point, Kenobi has gone through a very huge change in that he felt like he failed everyone and he has survivor's guilt. And I do think it is easier for him to tap into a real um, ability to like feel a similar type of pain to other people. Um,
Let me
so
let me say this.
like, well, okay.
It, at the end of this week's episode, the
Yep.
Gungan General,
Yep.
starring Jar Jar Binks as himself.
Yes. Yeah.
It is tactical compassion
Yeah, I think
that
that's very
Obi-Wan is
true.
employing
That's
as
very true.
because it's definitely a political move, because
Mhm.
you absolutely would get the support of the Jedi to be like, you're going to bring these people in that poisoned you off camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely do that. But he's making a tactical point to be like, just be aware
Yep.
that we're compassionate
You're right.
and Dooku is going to come
Not.
back.
You're right. And I do think that is not to interrupt your point, but I actually do think that is the one of the character flaws of the institution of the Jedi,
Mhm.
which is that it's like it's not actually real compassion. Like it's a sort of approximation of for
Mhm.
political purposes.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the episode isn't necessarily interrogating that so much as it is, as you've said
I
before,
was.
and I will repeat, shenanigan focused. It's
I
focused
was
on
interrogating it. I'm
well,
here
that's because
to
you're a
ask.
good, smart person.
It's because I'm an empathetic person.
Mhm. What?
What?
I have never once seen you share someone's emotion. Not ever.
Okay.
Not even within
Okay.
this earlier episode.
Okay. Okay. All right.
All right.
All right. If that's what you think, that's fine. Oh, he looks so concerned.
It's interesting to talk about these notions of empathy within the context of Star Wars and Star Trek,
Mhm.
where I don't know, both episodes have their own frustrations.
Sure.
Star Trek is interrogating something at, I feel, an aesthetic level.
Mhm.
Just to say my catchphrase, and Star Wars is just kind of focused on having shenanigans, which is
Not
absolutely fine.
always.
I just get frustrated.
In this situation, yeah, but not always.
Yeah.
So often it's really truly like having a conversation. I think we've proven that now with many examples. Don't look at me like that. Star Wars is better.
Star Trek is better.
When
You, Aspen. You, Wallace Shawn.
you gotta bleep that.
Yeah, I gotta bleep that. Bleep that. There we go.
When
What
you
do these
say,
episodes have in common, Aspen?
I mean, that's what I was trying to get at.
Sure, you're trying to bring it home before our next segment.
Yeah. I was trying to, well, and it's like less a commonality, more of a like, what are the levels of like what we recognize as human connection and empathy, sympathy, compassion for what purpose, like what driving like pieces of it.
I mean, within the paradigm of Star Wars versus Star Trek, well, at least within the version of Clone Wars, and perhaps this is an extension of the Dave Filoni's and George Lucas's worldview at this point in time, but perhaps compassion is a little bit more tactical as
Mhm.
opposed to how it is in Star Trek, which is that compassion is a basic. That you start from the baseline of everyone is
Yeah.
compassionate.
Yeah. I
At
guess
least with the
that's true.
paradigm of Star Wars.
Yeah.
In a post 9/11 world, perhaps even your heroes deploy compassion in ways that are disingenuous.
Yeah. They have to. Just by
'Cause
nature. I mean,
even your heroes
mhm.
from episode 1 on are flawed at their core.
I got a little secret for you.
Ah!
Every time
Captain Kirk?
Captain Kirk romances a lady lately, except for in some, not every time, just a few times now, it has been tactical compassion. He's been doing all he does a lot of fucking tactical shit.
Yeah.
I'm just here to say that perhaps, the utopian world of Star Trek is not so utopian. The world itself, the Earth below you might be, but the militaristic structure of the Federation is not.
Wait, Aspen, don't take the applause button away from me. Please don't do that.
Uh-oh,
No,
I
come
took
on.
it. I stole it. I came
Come
into your
on.
bedroom 1,000 miles
on.
away and I hit the
Don't.
button.
Ugh.
I'm here to scorch Earth. All your faves are problematic. Except DS9, it's a perfect show in every single way.
You know what faves aren't problematic?
But
A long time ago, start date this week. I courted a beau, I dated a geek, but none of them could warp my drive into hyperspace. The best of both worlds kept me in second place. Captain's log on a holocron. I wanted a snog. I penned a song. 17 more minutes of thighs in super high def. Aboard the USS Enterprise, DTF. Don't you take my Ewok glider and clip it. Don't you take my red shirt buddy and nip it. If you spill the tea, I'm gonna sip it. I starship it.
great. Time for us to name our favorite ships that fly through the stars and our
Mhm.
favorite ships that fly through our hearts.
Whoosh, whoosh.
Whoosh, whoosh, vroom, vroom. I have a first ship that is not a ship, it's actually a vehicle.
Here we go.
It's a moving vehicle.
It certainly is.
It is the Scalders.
Oh, those little rhino delos.
Those Rhino Delos from the Clone Wars episode, the Gungan General. I loved them. I loved them so much. And I
I
appreciate
saw them.
it.
I saw them bouncing on the horizon during the episode, and I wrote down and I circled it, and I'll try and put it up on the camera just for all to see. I said sheeps.
You said sheep.
I was hoping that we were going to get some space sheeps this week.
You got space rhinos instead.
We did, which I don't want to, don't want to, besmirch
mean,
great rhinos. Also,
right.
we didn't talk about the fact that there's acid geysers.
Oh, they are acid geysers. Yeah,
There's-
there's
There's acid geysers, but also there's mist in the air, which would imply that there's acid hanging in the air, which means that the atmosphere should be. Don't think about it too much.
I won't. I don't. Listen. Yeah. There's a fun little bit where they like hide in the geyser, and then Jar Jar is like, those beasties, when they run, we have to run. And then you're like, oh, okay. And then I immediately run. You're like, got it.
Mhm.
That geyser's about to blow. A very clever, though, connection with the natural world that our Gungan general has. I don't know. They're just really fun. He's just like, I have an idea. Classic Jar Jar. So they ride on the back of them. But then the pirates start shooting at them, and I got really anxious. I was like, I hope they don't hurt the rhinos. But then I was like, I bet they have really, really thick skin, and I bet they're going to be okay. They're just so nice to help, I love them. That's mine.
Aspen, I'm going to need to call in a favor
Mhm.
from you as the Star Wars expert.
Do I remember the
I
name
wrote
of the thing?
down because I don't know what the actual word for it, and it didn't say anything in the Filoni Zoni.
No?
The Bombat Clankins.
Oh, the clankers. What were they?
These big honking tanks that look based off of some pre-existing ships within there, and then also mixed with, for some reason, I want to say an Apache helicopter. And these big honking tanks that the pirates were flying in on the ground. They were very, very cool.
They were
and
very,
I enjoyed
very cool.
them.
I do not know what they are called.
All right.
And we can look it up later. Because I really liked them too. And I just don't know what they are. We'll have to look them up. But we can call them Bob Bag Clinkers for now.
I believe they are called the WLO-5 speeder tank.
Cool.
Because I typed in bomb bag Clinkins in DuckDuckGo. It was presented with the episode with the thing, the WLO-5 speeder tank.
Oh gosh, it does look so cool. It's
very
a pirate
cool.
tank. A pirate tank.
Whenever you say that out loud, Aspen, pirate tank, that's very cool. Tank. You know what's cool? Pirates. You know what else is cool? Tanks. Put them together, get a cool piece of hardware.
Brickian tank, a repulsor tank with heavy armor and weaponry used by Weequay pirate game, operating out of the backwater planet of Florum. So this is what they use.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and they don't talk about it on the Filoni Zoni in terms of, but like I wouldn't be surprised if what you're talking about is true, that they like borrowed visual components from others. And I guess you could also assume that they themselves probably pieced it together from other like things, like other equipment that they've probably pirated.
For sure.
Which is cool. I love that as a concept.
Speaking of pirated, Aspen, what are your favorite examples of getting booty?
Getting booty? Oh, geez, Louise. My fun, goofy answer is gym and therapy. I haven't had a dumb answer like that in a while. Though I just feel like she's gone through a lot. And, when you're a truly empathetic person, what you have to do is you have to really develop some strong boundaries of how much of your energy you're giving out and kind of taking in and stuff, So like perhaps some like therapeutic work would be really helpful for us. And I really ship that.
Sure.
But my real ship is Obi-Wan and Dooku. Have we had that before?
Let's go to the board. Palpatine Dooku, Yoda Dooku Grievous. No Obi-Wan and Dooku. Good job, Aspen.
Thanks. I just think that I think it's the equivalent, it may be all three of them, but I think Anakin was like a little out of this one. I think it was definitely an Obi-Wan Dooku thing. It's the equivalent of the oh no, there's only one bed. Like we're tied together by a laser rope.
I do wish that we had gotten that scene where they needed to go to sleep.
Yep.
And because it's smack dab in the 2000s, there's some pretty big lines of homoeroticism, but at the same time, they're like, actually, this feels kind of nice.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Or sorry, homophobia, not homoeroticism.
Oh, I wish. Well,
yeah. You wish that there was homophobia?
I wish there was homoeroticism.
Oh. That makes a lot more sense.
They sort of go weirdly hand in hand in different ways. People are weird. Yeah, that's mine.
All right.
And they're sniping at each other. I like those enemies to lovers. It's
so interesting that you said Anakin was out of this episode, because my ship for this week, and I wrote this down in my notebook, was Anakin and Dooku.
Well, I mean is, well, not out of, yeah.
Here's
okay.
why. Here's why. Anakin says so many things that seem to just irritate Dooku.
Yeah.
And I think Dooku is so irritated by it, but at the same time,
he's very into it.
Is that he kind of wants a brat.
Yeah. Well,
he sees how powerful that little brat is. And it's like, I don't know. Maybe I could use him. Maybe he could be bratty at me.
Oh my God.
And like, he's so against it, but at the same time, he's like, you're a petty little bitch, aren't you?
It's true. I guess you're right. I was thinking of a different sort of like, I don't know, a different type of dynamic. And Anakin, I'm still so caught up in the catching him. I'm still so caught up. And Anakin's just like, drop.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's nice. It's nice.
It's
I feel a touch like we ignored Star Trek. Maybe I can also ship those two weirdo dudes.
See, you can. Reminder, we're about to exit this segment, so you can only make one more change.
Maybe I'll ship them instead. You can have
Oh.
Anakin and Dooku.
You're gonna save Obi-Wan and Dooku for later?
Probably. You know what? That's a good. You know what? Let's ship these two guys. This. You know what? Here, okay. Yeah.
Here we go. All right, here we go.
Let's say it this way,
Okay.
because I need to give Star Trek some attention. They're here. They're like doing all these experiments. You can only imagine they're like down there a lot, like long hours. Like who knows if there's any more of them. In my mind, these two are more than coworkers. They are lovers.
They're co-people.
They're co-people, you know?
Mhm.
And like it really pains them to have to really do these types of experiments, you know, and like wait 30 minutes to reveal why. It's really rough for them.
It's good.
They probably like after this situation were like, wow, Fred, I don't know. The other one's like Tom.
Lal and Than.
Fred, Tom.
That's not what I said at all.
Frederick, Thomas. They're like, it's really rough, you know, I think like doing this kind of work. And then Thomas is like, yeah, man, it really is. Then I go, geezy. So that's my instead.
All right. Well, now that that's locked in and the segment is absolutely done, let me play my exclusive segment is done sound effects. We get to the central premise of this podcast. Right now, we have been dilly-dallying for an hour and a half. 2 hours if you're listening to the Patreon version.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, 20 minutes of that was us being very angry about something else entirely.
Completely angry about something else. But let's not dilly-dally.
No shenanigans.
Any longer.
This is
no
serious
shenanigans.
shit. Serious shit.
Serious stuff as we try and find out which one is better, Star Trek or Star Wars, by ranking the Empath from Star Trek, the original series, season 3, versus the Gungan General from Star Wars, the Clone Wars, season 1. And I will go first, starting with the Empath, and I am going to give this episode a 5.
Wow.
I found it quite sleepy. I found my attention wandering. As I said before, we kind of cycled the same beats over and over and over again. It's unfortunate. It's also frustrating that there is a better episode there, but I tried to just take a thing as it is, as opposed to how I want it to be. And how it is pretty darn dull with a lackluster central message that we've definitely seen in other Star Trek in a more potent form, because you don't make it about this other character. You make it about our central characters learning that they're secretly racist.
What?
We'll get to it.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go 5.8 because while I agree with you, and you talked me into this a little bit more, might have given it a little bit higher. I really think it is elevated in part by doing something a little different in terms of like the production of it.
The production design is extraordinary. I adore it.
I
wish that more shows would push it to be this strange.
Yeah.
At one point, Kirk is looking out onto something that we do not see, and the lights just suddenly turn on as if he is finally seeing something.
Yeah.
It is straight up expressionism.
It's very cool. And I like it. And I like that. I forgot her name, but I liked the main actress, the one who does play Jim. She ruled. Yeah. You could tell that she was like, what a wild character to get to play. Like, what a very expressionistic thing to get to do, and to like make this very theatrical and dance, kind of like very danceability kind of feel to it. And so I think that's what gets it higher for me. But everything else is true.
You're talking about Catherine Hayes as
Catherine
Jim.
Hayes. Love her. She was wonderful.
That can't be possible.
5 and a 5.8. What's that? 5.4.
For some reason it's saying 6.2666.
5.4. Oh, that's the devil getting into it.
Oh, you know what it is? Averaging B and C column as opposed to just D.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to need to change some stuff on the spreadsheet.
Uh-oh. It's a 5.4.
Yeah, it's a 5.4. But it's still
Yeah.
anyone's game, Aspen. As we
Yeah.
move over to the Gungan General, and I will rank it first, and I think that I'm just going to give it a 4.5.
Okay. Oh,
And that's just how I'm feeling this week.
sure.
That's how I was feeling about it. Too many shenanigans, which I'm fine with shenanigans, but the shenanigans didn't feel all that special.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing new about the shenanigans. It was just shenanigans for shenanigans' sake. I
Mhm.
felt pretty uninspired. And what adds to my frustration is that there's a very inspiring thing. Actually, both plot lines have something very inspiring. Jar Jar possibly taking agency,
Mhm.
as opposed to like Bombad Jedi, where he does become slightly redeemed, but that's a little bit of an accident, as opposed to him making the purposeful choice here to represent. There's
Which he
also
does.
a wild, somber scene that George really liked and wanted to include, which is whenever the other senator on the ship dies, Jar Jar has a funeral and is quite somber about it. And I think that is touching.
Yeah.
And it indicates a greater emotionality that is only hinted at and never really seen for the rest of the episode. And then similarly, didn't even talk about the start of the episode, which completely disregards the brilliant ending from Dooku Captured, where they're just like, just happened. And then you start the episode, and turns out Anakin and Obi-Wan were not smart, like you just saw. They were actually stupid and got poisoned anyways. So
it was kind of wild. Like, I was like, okay, what happened? Like this. Anyway, yes.
That's dumb. And
that's bad continuity.
I don't like that.
A fun fact is that you learned too from the Filoni Zoni is that there's a little Easter egg in that the staff that the senator had that that Jar Jar kind of puts into the pile, his death pile, is the staff from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That is fun.
The staff, that I forgot what it's called, but it's the one that Indiana takes into the like that underground space to like identify the staff of Ra. It's the staff of Ra.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's just an Easter egg. It doesn't mean anything. And I think that's cute.
That is cute. I enjoyed it very much. Aspen.
6.4.
2 minutes later, 6.4.
Yeah. Everything's true. I also liked it. I liked it more than you. I had fun. I think that there is a touch of, I like the agency of, it's one of those where it's like not more than the sum of its parts. It's like, yeah, for some, it's like the pieces of it were really fun. As a whole, could have been more. So, yeah.
That brings the total to 5.45 for the Gungan General versus the Empath's 5.4 in what could be argued the slimmest victory by a margin of 0.05. Aspen,
I did.
Are you satisfied that Star Wars wins the week?
I didn't mean to do that. I meant 6.4. I meant that.
Star Wars wins the week.
Oh my God, barely. That's wild.
It is wild.
I mean, it's an empty victory,
But a victory is a victory nonetheless.
Yeah. You're like, yep. Guess you won.
You did it, Aspen. Great job.
It's all me, I would say. Especially in a situation where we do, in fact, give it scores. There's no objectivity at all.
That's absolutely correct.
I'm like, oh my God, I won. Oh my God, how did it happen? I was, for what it's worth, going to give it that no matter what.
Sure. But certainly we don't make this show in a vacuum. And while we can give each other accolades, so too must we give those accolades to our fearless patrons, of which we love them so much. And for $5 a month, you can get early versions of these episodes and extended versions of the episodes. And for just $1 a month, we'll just say your dang name on the podcast. So
that's nice.
It is pretty nice. We just want to say your name because we really like you. And you too could join the fine auspices of fine folks such as Timbo DeSosa, Heidi Rogers, Kevin Miller, Arizona Mark, Austin Aaron, and lastly but certainly not leastly, Joel T. Partner, who composed our I Starship It theme song. Our main and ending theme was composed by Mr. Tosin Awofeso. You can get more of his work in the show notes. Just click on the link that is right next to his name. If you don't want to reach out to us via our Patreon, you can send us an email, trekwarspod@gmail.com. We love reading all of your correspondence, and more than likely we'll read it on air. And if for some reason you don't want any of those things, follow us over on Instagram, instagram.com/trekwarspod, and over at Blue Sky. Just search Trek Wars Pod. And also we have a YouTube channel so you can see Aspen make faces such as this.
Wait. Yeah.
Sorry, audio listeners, you can't see that. You got to find it at youtube.com/@TrekWarsPod. Aspen, as per always, I friggin' love you so much.
Friggin' love you.
And listeners, we friggin' love you. Thank you so much for listening. May the Force be with you, and live long and prosper.
You know what I miss is Moopsie. You haven't played Moopsie in a while.
I played it during the episode.
Oops. I forgot.
Oopsie.